Hi, this is Jeff Owens from the Classic Horrors Club podcast. Welcome to the video companion for episode 52, Barbara Steele. This video contains highlights and bonus features from the full podcast, which you can find on SoundCloud at the link shown below. Sit back and relax as Rich Chamberlain and I tour the life and career of horror icon Barbara Steele and take a critical look at three of the films from the height of her career: The Ghost, Terror Creatures from the Grave, and Revenge of the Blood Beast.
Hey, it's early Sunday morning, and
Yes.
I'm not other than a few drinks of tea here. Yeah.
I
Oh,
have
that's
my
awesome.
coffee in my Frankenstein mug, which is going to need a refill soon. But
See, that's the bad thing is like I don't drink coffee, and I try not to drink pop every day. So I mean, I do have my Coke, but I don't have it every day. That's the thing. I don't want to do that every day. So I don't have like a regular intake of caffeine. I need to, because I'm not sure this tea is caffeinated. So that's a good question. I need to look into that. Maybe it is.
it may
Maybe
all
I
be
am kidding.
mental. I don't know how much it really physically contributes to anything. All right, let's dig into the life and career of one Barbara Steele. As you mentioned, Richard, her birthday is December 29th. She was born in 1937 in Birkenhead, Cheshire, England. And on her upcoming birthday, she will be, like you said, 83 years old. As a young woman in England, she studied art at the Chelsea Art School and even for a time in Paris at the Sorbonne. She was going to be a painter. But in 1957, she joined a repertory company and began acting. She appeared in several British TV shows, and her first official movie was something called Bachelor of Hearts in 1958. So 21 years old, starting her acting career. She did make her American TV debut in 1960 on a show called Adventures in Paradise. Now, you might be able to straighten this out. I'm a little unsure of her trips to the United States and, back. Obviously, she's in the States at this point if she's making an American television show. She was supposed to be in, speaking of Elvis Presley, the movie called Flaming Star in 1960, but she was replaced by Barbara Eden. So still in the States, obviously, 1961, she appeared in an episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents. If you're familiar with that series, it was an episode called Beta Delta Gamma. Maybe she played a sorority girl. I don't know.
Maybe.
Could be. So at this time, we're about in the late 50s. So she's 20, still, early 20s. She had a contract with the Rank organization, which would be in England. So again, I'm not clear on what she's doing in the States and all of that, but they sold her contract to 20th Century Fox. And I think you're going to speak to this later on, but so obviously starting out in England, going to the United States, doing some things here and there, not really breaking out yet. I think Hollywood maybe had a different idea in mind for what they wanted to do with her. But as luck would have it, there was a writer's strike. And this sort of released her from her obligations, and she booked it out of there to Italy. So Mario Bava, famed Italian director, was making Black Sunday, and he needed some British cast members because he wanted it to be more comparable to Dracula. And so he wanted to put some British people in there. And therefore, he hired Barbara Steele, and this is the movie that made her a star.
I revisited that this past week and introduced Carla to it, and she loved it. Carla's not a fan of some of the other Barbara Steele movies. In fact, she tapped out on some of them. But this one, I said, you got to watch this one. I said, you'll like this one. And she really did. It's a classic. Everyone, even if you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend that if you want to dive into some Barbara Steele films, Black Sunday needs to be at the top of the list.
And here again, I'm confused. And, these movies come out on certain years. You look at release dates, you're not really sure when they're made. So her next movie was Pit and the Pendulum with Roger Corman and Vincent Price. That was actually made in the United States. So I don't know if she filmed that before Black Sunday or if she flew back and forth. But nevertheless, in 1961, Pit and the Pendulum.
She doesn't have a huge role in that movie, but actually just revisited that during October because it's on one of the Vincent Price collections. I think it's on Vincent Price Collection 1, the one that just got re-released. Beautiful picture, fantastic movie, but and she's got a pivotal role in that. I mean, she's in the climax of the film. I'm not going to tell you how, but she's not in a lot of it. But her screen time definitely at the end is quite impactful. So.
And that's a comment I was going to make. And of course, we're only sampling 3. I know you watched a lot more than me, but she's known for these movies, for this Italian period in her life, for being a horror star. Her roles aren't always that big. Especially, I mean, she's gone from a lot of the last movie that we watched. And yeah, isn't necessarily the focus or the main character in a lot of these movies.
Yeah.
In 1962, she answered an open casting call for none other than Federico Fellini, and she has a small but pivotal role in 1963's 8½. So this is, to me, a turning point because we're going a big change from, horror, Pit and the Pendulum, Black Sunday to Fellini. And she took 10 days off from the filming of that to make The Horrible Dr. Hitchcock in 1962. So one of those crossroads in life, you have to wonder if she had not have done that, would her career as a horror star have continued or not?
Yeah.
Well, why don't we take a break and we'll come back and dig in deep to our first movie, The Ghost from 1963. My Frankenstein mug is empty. I think I need to fill it. So we'll be right back.
The ghost will carry you to the depths of hell's horror.
I can't go on being the devoted nurse and the loving wife. You've got to put an end to it, Charles. I can't even bear to touch him.
They played with the burning fires of illicit passions, while he dallied with the devil himself.
Be quick, give me the antidote. Please, Charles.
Is he alive or dead? Is he a corpse or the ghost? From beyond the veil he speaks and rides unseen to mark this house with the black sign of death. They knew the terror of fear.
Stop! Stop! Stop!
And the frenzy of limitlessly indulging their lusts until the ghost turned their love into the violence of avaricious hate.
Got to remember, we're looking at 3 films from the 60s that are from Italy. So we're talking about Euro horror here. And that is a different style. That's a different beast entirely. Yeah, there's a lot of repetition in themes and look, the Gothic, feel. And we get that in all these movies. I don't think that's specific to Barbara Steele. It's that Italy and at that time. But I kind of want to call that out because although we're focusing on her, let's think as we go through these of, Euro horror. And for a lot of people, a little goes a long way.
For me, it's like I've got to take it in small doses for me to enjoy it. And I think that was my problem is I was like cramming all these films in with similar themes. And I'm like, didn't I just see this in the last movie? It's like, somebody, screwed somebody over and they're coming back as a ghost. And not to say that they're not good, but for me, that's kind of where I was at. So you're right. There's a style. I love the Gothic horror style, and definitely missed it when we get to the last film we're going to cover. I was like, gosh, I wish there was a vengeful ghost in a Gothic horror setting. But nonetheless, they do kind of, when you watch them a bunch together, they do kind of blend together a little bit. So things don't go well for Margaret Hitchcock when she and her lover, Charles, plot to murder her paralyzed husband, John. First of all, John leaves his money and jewels to the church. Then he's buried with the key to the safe in which they're stored. That's only where the nightmare begins for Margaret. Then she's visited by the ghost.
The Ghost was released in Italy March 30th, 1963. Didn't hit the States until 1965. It premiered in Dallas on February 18th. What did you think of The Ghost, Rich?
Of the three films, just coming right out of the gate, I'm going to say it is my favorite of the three films. I love the style of it, and I will say that this is a film I hope gets a formal Blu-ray release at some point. I want to see a better print. I thought the movie was a little long. I liked the story. I liked the gothic feel to it.
The director, Ricardo Freda, he shot Kaltiki, the Immortal Monster, which I love.
So many of these writers and directors will have Americanized names. So if you watch this and you're like, well, I didn't see Ricardo Freda's name up there. I saw Robert Hampton. Well, that was his Americanized name. I
love this movie, even on its own, not just in comparing these three. I loved it. If the overlords at YouTube don't somehow sense that we're sharing clips from it, there's going to be a lot of clips on our video companion because it's just beautiful. It's got everything gothic you need: a big house, seances, skulls everywhere. And I want to come back to that in a minute. Creepy music box, wolves howling in the woods, storms. It's Scotland 1910. It's dripping with atmosphere. It's everything gothic all in one. And the camera work, the angles, the plot twists, it's just, I thought it was remarkable. I really, really was not expecting it from this movie. There's a couple scenes I want to point out that I thought were exceptional. Several times there is genuine suspense. So you know that Barbara Steele's character, is not too fond of her husband. So he's somewhat incapacitated. She's going to give him a shave. Well, there's nothing creepier than, the hands of the blade in someone that has it out for the other person and they're going to shave them. I expected at any instant to just, slice it.
I was expecting the Sweeney Todd, routine. It's like, oh, there we go.
We heard it at a restaurant in Copenhagen. It was the first time I met you, remember? So long ago. Nearly 13 years. The waiter insisted on presenting us with a bottle of Dutch gin. I was a real man then. A doctor, building a reputation, yes. And you, a beautiful, penniless young thing, without a care in the world.
Yeah. However, we get at the end, let's just say there's sort of an explosion of violence where there's some blade action that comes in, but it's not during this suspense.
No.
I also thought it was really, really creepy when the ghost is speaking through Catherine's voice. or
Yes.
through her body. She's, sitting in a chair in a trance, and then this male voice is coming out.
Yeah, that was very effective. Yeah, that.
Margaret. Margaret. Margaret.
What is it with the skulls? I mean, just everywhere, and a mausoleum, the hallway into it, little built-in shelves on the side, skulls. There's a skull on top of the coffin. That's one of those Euro horror things that maybe they're like, oh yeah, we decorate our cemeteries with,
I always
skulls.
wondered,
But
like,
where do the
yeah.
skulls come from? Whose skulls are those?
I know. It's like, well, you're in a mausoleum. It's like you couldn't bother to give the poor soul a burial. It's like, no, we're going to use this skull for decoration. Yeah, it makes it look creepy, but yeah, you do wonder. It's like, so did they get those at the Halloween store just for decoration, or those like servants that just didn't rank a full burial? But we want to keep them with the family, so yeah, that's funny.
And then there was one scene where, and I for sure am going to put this on the video companion, that to me epitomizes why Barbara Steele was such a star in this genre. And that's when she's sitting at her dressing table brushing her hair, and she hears a noise behind her, and she kind of spins in her chair, and the look on her face, it's beautiful, it's captivating, it's, to me, just epitomized what Barbara Steele is. And that in that one shot, to me, it said, oh, okay, this is why Barbara Steele is Barbara Steele.
Charles, is that you?
So the next movie, you've mentioned it several times, The Long Hair of Death in 1964. It was directed by Antonio Margheriti, who is a well-known Italian director. He also did Castle of Blood with Barbara, her next movie, same year, 1964.
Highly recommend Long Hair of Death. It truly is an amazing film, and my personal favorite of the Barbara Steele movies.
Awesome. Did you watch Castle of Blood?
I did. I saw Nightmare Castle, Castle of Blood. I saw both of those.
Okay. Let me go ahead and mention Nightmare Castle, and then maybe you can comment on either or both of them.
Yeah.
Director Mario Caiano. Supposedly, Nightmare Castle 1965 came from his passion of the Gothic genre and for Barbara Steele. So he built that project around her and the genre. Let's take our second break, and we'll come back and talk about Terror Creatures from the Grave from 1965.
Terror Creatures from the Grave.
Avenge me! I've summoned you! Avenge me!
Go back to the dead!
In a dreadful night of reckoning, the forces of darkness strike with blood-freezing horror.
You're here.
A nightmare of diabolical happenings, conceived in a murder-haunted house of blood by the maniac called Geronimus, a dead man with the monstrous power to return from his grave.
I tell you, it was my father. I saw him.
What are you saying? Can't you see the boat is empty?
Look! Look! There's water dripping from the oars.
A bone-chilling shocker, inspired by Edgar Allan Poe.
No!
Terror Creatures from the Grave, starring Barbara Steele.
Things don't go well for Albert Kovac when he's summoned to review the will of Geronimus Half. First of all, Geronimus died a year ago. Then townspeople began mysteriously dying as the anniversary of his death approaches. That's only where the nightmare begins for Cleohoff and her daughter Corinne when they're visited by terror creatures from the grave.
Richard, what do we make of Terror Creatures from the Grave, 1965, released on June 23rd in Italy, and again came here about a year later in the United States, first saw it in April of 1966?
I enjoyed it, but not as much as The Ghost. The film, I struggled with this one a little bit. I felt like it meandered a little bit at times. The running time was good. I don't know that there was anything that stood out to me that should have been edited or cut back, but I struggled with some of the plot points.
I liked it a lot, but here's something that I think will signify what the difference between The Ghost and this is. So it has the same trappings of The Ghost, the Gothic. I mean, almost exactly like a checklist, creepy cold castle, all of that thing. But what this has that The Ghost doesn't is the storms, the thunder and the lightning. And the way it signifies the difference is this is a type of movie where early on, when the big reveal is that her husband is dead, cue the thunder, cue the lightning.
Looks like he's right.
So
Yeah.
it's a little more manufactured, a little more
Seal seems authentic.
less
I
natural,
don't understand.
more
Didn't your
forced.
husband tell you?
My husband has been dead for a year.
Yeah, I don't get the water thing at all. I mean,
Water.
I get it, how it's like their savior, and it is, mentioned throughout the movie. It's not like a surprise, but yet somehow the way it is portrayed is incredibly convenient and doesn't make a lot of sense. In this, compared to The Ghost, we have a couple of, I don't know if I'd say advancements, but additions or whatever. Number one, there's more gore. It's a little bit gorier, and there's more skin. I mean, there are twice, a side boob shot of a woman. And so it's getting a little sexier, getting a little bloodier. This movie also features Luciano Pigozzi. We've spoken with him before. I can't remember we spoke of him before. We did not speak with him. I don't remember what movie it was, but he is the Italian Peter Lorre because of his resemblance to Peter Lorre. He has a small but pivotal role. I had trouble with the way the script handled this because first of all, you see him and you don't know, they don't explain who he is. He's just like lurking around the house. And one of the characters says, "What a strange creature. He has such a faraway look." And this turns out to be Kurt the gardener. Literally, that's his role. If you look in IMDb, Kurt the gardener. He'll come back later, but all too conveniently. It's, when they still think that this is not supernatural and there could be different explanations, there's a certain plot point where they just instantly go, "Well, we've got to talk to Kurt." And that seemed a little out of nowhere. They didn't really sprinkle anything between the 2 points to make us think, oh, Kurt's involved somehow.
It's almost the hour of your death 1 year ago today. And the forces of evil you dominated will break loose. The plague spreaders among us again. They'll show mercy for no one. Punishment will strike the innocent and the guilty alike. Please forgive me, Master, but I must break my long silence now. Your daughter, Corinne, at least, has to be warned. Before it's too late.
I think it's a great idea, great Gothic trappings. I love the mummified hands that they keep in the case, and I love the idea about plague victims rising, but it just really, it peters off at the end. You don't really get the payoff. You see graves opening and maybe a hand reached out, but that's about really all you get. I mean, the horror in this really is what the people do, even though there's the threat of this supernatural horror.
Yep. I think you liked it probably a little better than I did. I don't know that I would go back and revisit this. Unlike The Ghost, where I want to see that again, and unlike some of the other ones, I would definitely revisit. I'm not sure that I would revisit this one, which I guess kind of speaks volumes. I enjoyed it, but I had some problems with it.
Well, speaking of speaking volumes, I can't wait to get to our next movie, Beast or Revenge of the Blood Beast from 1966. But let's take a break before we do that. I need to steel myself and get it, steel myself. So we'll be right back.
The she-beast, deadlier than Dracula, wilder than the werewolf, more frightening than Frankenstein. Another victim of a strange revenge, wreaked on the innocent from beyond the grave, hurling a town into a terrifying struggle against the powers of darkness. The witch Verdella, known to be dead for centuries, comes to blood-chilling life before disbelieving eyes, unleashing all manner of monstrous evil in the town in which she was supposed to have breathed her last. You'll see a creature of the damned, damning the living to destruction when you ceased. Starring Barbara Steele, Mel Wells, and co-starring John Carlson. You'll see a monster in human form defy her doom as the townspeople drag her from her cave to the witch's dunking chair. But even that deadly device cannot save.
Things don't go well for Philip and Veronica when they spend their honeymoon in Transylvania. First of all, they stay in an inn run by a peeping Tom. Then they run their car off the road into the same lake where a witch was drowned 200 years ago. That's only where the nightmare begins for the newlyweds, when Veronica disappears and Philip may suffer from the revenge of the Blood Beast.
So, Revenge of the Blood Beast, 1966, a movie for which Barbara Steele was paid a whopping salary of $1,000. And maybe back then, I don't know, but doesn't seem like much.
Doesn't seem like much. No.
You know, I know we're going to dog on this movie. There are some things that I really liked about it. I don't know. Do we want to go good? What do you want first? Good news or bad news?
Well, this movie is a mess. So why don't we start off with the good, and then we can get to the bad and the ugly.
All right. Well, it opens fantastic. There's a witch. Townspeople grab their torches. They grab her. They tie her to this marvelous contraption and wheel her down to the lake. And it's like a big seesaw. It looked like a catapult. I thought first they were going to like shoot her across the sky or something. But it's like a seesaw, and they dip her in the water and accuse her of witchcraft. They hammer a hot spike into her.
Yeah, brutal.
Wonderful. And I thought, oh my gosh, we are in for a treat.
On this day, be ye with your descendants cursed until eternity. Think not that ye are rid of me, but I, Vardella, will return. Vardella will return.
The spike! Drive home the spike! No! Let her die!
I also like the setup and the concept of going to Transylvania. I like the lore or the world. I can't believe I'm going to say this for this movie, but the world building that it does. This is where there's an ancestor of Van Helsing. And sure, there's no vampires because his family has wiped them out over the years. This is a great-great-grandson of a Van Helsing that's here. And the threat they have now is witches, or a particular witch.
Yeah.
But there's mention of a library where, you know, books on the supernatural are stored. It's the only place because following, you know, all the vampires and eradicating them, the government has said, you know, they have kind of gotten rid of all that documentation and things. I thought that was good. And that's where my list stops.
We get a side boob shot of Barbara Steele, you know, which might very well be the best thing about the movie. I know Michael Reeves, a lot of people love him. I'm going to say in regards to some of the wide variety of film that we get, Michael Reeves fails miserably in this movie to keep the tone constant. Because what is this movie? I mean, it's presented as a horror film, but then there's clearly comedic elements, and then it goes back to being a horror film. A good director would have kept the film reined in.
But anyway, she's unconscious. She's incapacitated. Why does Van Helsing bring her back to life? I mean, he goes through a ritual to bring her back to life.
Return, thou creature, from the very depths of evil. Return to hideous mortality. I give you once more your freedom. I give you life.
I don't know why didn't they try to resurrect the witch before and you know, I don't know. I don't that was a whole thing. I couldn't get past the fact that this takes place. So the witch gets killed and 200 years have passed, yet the dunking device is still in the same spot and didn't dissolve or break down after 200 years.
They didn't put it in the shed or something. I mean,
I know. Yeah. It's like they just leave it in the same spot and like, you know, then we shall go back to our lives. And what do you think of the witch's makeup?
I thought it was pretty good. It's grotesque. I mean, it's, I thought it was okay. I mean, that's,
which I thought was it was interesting, right? Compared to the other films that we had seen. I mean, like whenever there's a ghost or, you know, it's always like attractive, right? I mean, Barbara Steele is, you know, and like in Long Hair of Death, you know, she's attractive. And here, like the witch is very much not what you would typically see a witch as, like in a Hollywood film, for example. It's a very horrific creature. On one hand, yeah, the witch was grotesque, and that was good. On another hand, it felt just kind of, I don't know, Halloween maskish.
Yeah, I can see that.
The mouth, I mean, there was no articulation in the mouth, really. I mean, you could tell that it was just kind of a mask or an apparatus, and didn't seem very lifelike or practical. It looked grotesque, but I wish that there would have been a better makeup job done.
So let's talk about the climax. This is where you had watched it maybe the night before, but I was watching it and I just started texting you throughout the
I
rest
gave
of the
you
movie.
warning. I was giving you heads up. It was like,
Yeah.
oh, they sped up the film too.
Yes, that's to me the cardinal sin in any movie is unless they perfect a way to do it where you can tell they're not speeding it up, you should never do that.
It's listed as a horror comedy because the movie got off track, and again, nobody was railing it in. And I think I had read where Michael Reeves did not like the ending, but didn't have time to do it right. It was a rush production.
You're right, and you said something about, you called it a clown car, because how many cops can you put into this teeny little yellow car?
Well, yeah, it's like that. You get that. I don't know. There's so many scenes like where.
Get in, get in.
I don't know that I'd revisit this movie, but I've got an amazing print of it sitting on my shelf, and the box looks all kind of cool. And
yeah, I like the box.
Yeah, Revenge of the Blood Beast. I can't recommend it unless you are a Barbara Steele fan, and then it needs to be at the bottom or towards the bottom of the list. I think you need to see other Barbara Steele films before you see this one. That said, I'm glad we covered it for the podcast because we're doing a public service. If you haven't seen Shoebies, you need to know these things going into it. But then again, not knowing it, kind of throws you for a loop, and that element of surprise, we're ruining that for people. People won't get
That's a fine line you walk between, public service and being able to express what you think about something.
Yes.
Well, let's move on and see what Barbara Steele does with her career after this.
Yes, let's do that.
She made another movie, An Angel for Satan, in 1966. Again, I'm sorry to repeat myself, but I don't understand the back and forth, from different countries, because she appeared in an episode of I Spy on NBC in 1966. 1968, Curse of the Crimson Altar, also known as The Crimson Cult. But at this point, 1968, Barbara Steele said she was sick of being typecast in horror movies. In fact, she's quoted as saying, "I never want to climb out of another frickin' coffin again." So for a little while, she didn't. She made a TV movie, Honeymoon with a Stranger. About this same time, she married screenwriter James Poe. Interesting, in 1969. Now, James Poe was a very accomplished writer, and it's not clear, but from here on out, it's kind of intimated that she needed him for her career. He wrote parts for her. He got her into movies. But there's also this weird phenomenon of Barbara Steele being in scenes that are cut from movies, or being in background scenes are very small. So, for example, They Shoot Horses, Don't They? He wrote a part for her, but for whatever reason, she didn't actually get that part. It went to Susanna York. They were married for, I guess they got divorced a few years later in 1978. So married 9 or 10 years. They did have one son, Jonathan Jackson Poe. He was born August 11th, 1970. This period, she went 5 years. She didn't make any movies. I don't know if it's because she was raising a child or what, but just didn't really do anything. In 1972, she appeared on an episode of Night Gallery, The Sins of the Fathers. And then in the 70s, she did make a return to B movies and horror movies. At the age of 37, she was in Caged Heat from 1974. And I wish I could think of something this clever, but I did see it. This was a point in Barbara's career where at one point she would have played a beautiful inmate of this prison. But 37 years old, instead, she's playing the wheelchair-bound warden of the prison. So she's definitely made a change, and not so down on horror. I mean, she's appears in several more horror movies. Shivers from 1975, Piranha, or I like to say Piranha, from 1978, and Silent Scream from 1979. She was in a couple movies that weren't horror. Well, I should say, technically she was in. She was in a movie, I Never Promised You a Rose Garden, 1977, but her scenes were cut. She was in Pretty Baby from 1978, but only in a background shot. So she kind of took a little retirement from acting for almost a decade. However, she became not prolific. She didn't produce a lot, but she did do some producing of movies and TV. She was an executive producer of Winds of War and War and Remembrance in 83 and 88, and in fact won the Emmy when War and Remembrance won for Outstanding Drama Comedy Special, and she shared the stage with Dan Curtis when he made his memorable speech in accepting that award. Probably from this relationship with Dan Curtis, she was in the 1991 revival of Dark Shadows. She played Dr. Julia Hoffman. After that, she was relatively quiet. She did come back to produce in 2003, and this just fascinates me. I'm not sure why, but she was an associate producer of Queer Eye for the Straight Guy, the original series. So it's like,
I knew that, yeah.
Where does that come from? There's got to be a story there. I would love to know what that is. In 2010, she appeared on one of the Dark Shadows audio dramas, The Night Whispers. And then I think I would say, I don't know if it was an attempt at a comeback, but it was certainly an opportunity for her to return to the screen and possibly take her career in a new area as an older woman. She was in The Butterfly Room in 2012. I believe if it wasn't the lead role, it was an important role in that movie.
I heard that it was kind of the start of a pseudo late career renaissance for her, but I don't necessarily think that it was going to be leading to a full-blown renaissance of her career. I mean, she does a voice right now of the character Miranda.
Castlevania Netflix animated series.
You know, she's always had a different approach to the profession as we've been talking her career. I mean, there's a roller coaster ride, of highs and lows, and she's active, she's not active. So, I was watching a lot of different interviews with her from at different stages, and it's interesting. Again, she's not a huge fan of horror films, but she makes that comment about she loves the darkness, and things like necrophilia and incest are a great arena to work in. And that's an interesting quote, but that's her take, is that she loves. It's kind of interesting. She's not a huge fan of horror films, but yet that's kind of what she's known for, and what she's probably the best at least from what we've seen. And she loves the darkness, and she doesn't like the bubbly Hollywood persona. So I think that's why she's, whether she gravitated towards horror or horror kind of lured her to that and what she became known for. Clearly who she is there's a darkness to who she is as a person that's implied in several interviews. So I think that's what she brings forth in her films, is that starkness, that dark quality, that there's a kind of an underlying of sensuality in her performance that isn't, depending on the film.
Yeah, I got the impression she sort of came to accept her her role or position in horror films. One last movie I want to mention, probably her last significant, other than Castlevania, was a 2014 movie called Lost River. This was Ryan Gosling's directorial debut Apparently, it's a drama fantasy thriller that she had a supporting role in. I really enjoyed this. I didn't know a lot about Barbara Steele before we did this. I didn't know, I knew she made all these Italian movies, but I knew she wasn't Italian. I didn't really know how she got to be there. And it's an interesting body of work. And she definitely has her fans. I think it's obvious why. And I really enjoyed working on this episode. Well, it's nice also to do an episode where the subject is still with us.
Yes, absolutely.
Have to announce a death date, and maybe I can just close this out before we take a break and say happy birthday to Barbara Steele.
Absolutely. Happy birthday.
December 29th.